Greetings, Dr. Steffi here. In this live broadcast, I want to talk to you about micromanaging, easy for me to say, and how that affects your business. Now, most business owners, they don't like micromanaging, but they feel a lot of times compelled to do it because they don't see an alternative, because they have knowledge in their brain that other people frankly just don't have. And so the whole business seems to spin around them quite a bit. Now, these business owners aren't dumb, and this may be you. You may have tried a lot of different things. You may have tried to delegate, and then sometimes for simpler things it went okay, but for other things it didn't. And so you keep doing those things. You put it back on your shoulders because you just couldn't delegate it. You may have also invested in training and development, and that can help too, but only to an extent, because again, there's knowledge in your brain that just you still cannot delegate that, because the training and development only got at some things, but not some of the core things that you have learned over the course of probably decades. You may have even sought advice from peers, and maybe you're part of groups like Vistage, etc. And those are also really awesome and helpful. But again, there's a limit to what this gets at. Then there's, of course, the advice of work-life balance. Increase this, set boundaries, say no. Of course, that also works to an extent. However, can you really say no when it's really core to your business that such and such a thing gets done, such and such a client gets served the way they can get served, and maybe your team doesn't? Perhaps you've tried to hire outside help, and again, how much can they really help when they don't know what you know? All right, all of this, I'm going to give you some tips right now about how to address this. And first, we need one distinction, namely, not all knowledge is created equal. All the things that we just talked about work well for knowledge that you can readily access. That means knowledge you have and you can think of and you can share in some way or another with others. However, there's a second type of knowledge, and that knowledge often trips us up, even though it is so helpful and so critical for what we're doing in our businesses. And that's what I call unconscious competence, meaning this is knowledge that you have, but you cannot remember you have. It's in the back of your head. And sometimes I give a demonstration of this, which looks like, marbles that represent unique knowledge that's in a glass jar of other gems, but it's hidden in there. And it's difficult for you to pick it out and hand it to other people. So it's unconscious knowledge that is really the core of what makes sharing knowledge difficult. Because how can you share something you don't remember you have? So how can you even access any of this? Well, when a situation calls for that knowledge, it rises to the surface, and that gives us the opportunity to catch it at that moment. And that's something that I actually teach, how to do that and how to do that effectively, because we are all very busy. So I'm going to give you 3 tips right now. And this is really the framework of what I call brilliance mining. See, the word brilliance doesn't mean just, Elon Musk type of brilliance or Einsteinian brilliance, but what it really means is it's your brilliance. It's your unique knowledge, especially the unconscious knowledge, and of course some of the conscious knowledge as well. But it's your experience, your expertise, your wisdom. And that is like the fuel that makes your business actually as successful as it is. And actually, now think of this. If you think of that brilliance, as I call it for short, right? Experience, expertise, and knowledge, wisdom, all of that, if I call that brilliance for short, which that's what I do, then if that's fuel and you imagine you have it in a can, fuel can, what if you could share that fuel with the right people? So now you can see that you can amplify what you're doing, right? Without swallowing your life, without killing you, without impacting your work-life balance, etc. And you can use your time for better things, right? So rather than running after people and sharing and spoon feeding knowledge, which is especially hard to do with the knowledge that's unconscious to you, right? It's almost impossible. It is impossible, actually, because you can't think of it, right? If you can share that knowledge effectively, now you can scale and you have more time, and then you can take some of the projects that you have on the back burner, the ones you'd really like to get to, you can tackle them, as well as you can have more fun with your family and go travel and things like that. So here are the 3 tips. The first tip is you have to understand what is the most critical knowledge that you have in your brain that you haven't been able to share completely with other people on your team, for example, or even with your customers, if that's applicable, right? What is it that people need you for? And so that kind of handcuffs you, right? So if you could share that effectively, then you get your freedom back and you have all these benefits we just talked about. But so I call that brilliance mapping. It's kind of like going into an area that you're mining, which is your brain, and saying, okay, where are the nuggets, the brilliance nuggets? And you map them. And then you decide, okay, which of these nuggets are most important? Now, when you do that by yourself, you may only see some of the nuggets. When you do it with a brilliance miner, you'll see a lot more of them. And the brilliance miner doesn't even have to be me, but it could be someone who gives you fresh eyes and who understands the concept of brilliance mining. All right. So then the second tip is to actually start to extract it. So I call that brilliance extraction. So you have this treasure map from step 1. You know where those nuggets are. You have decided which ones you want to start to excavate first, and then you go about doing that. And for that, now you pick up first the things that are easy to pick up. So maybe you've already written some things down, or they're at the top of your mind, etc., etc. Then you go deeper. And there is a bit of an art to that. I'm going to talk more about this in other broadcasts, but basically, one tip I can give you right now is this. Whenever you're already training someone, there's an inaction, right? So they ask questions, and those questions are going to prompt you to think of something that was buried in your mind. Maybe, if you talk about a process, you give them, say, 5 steps about that process, how to do that process. But then when people ask questions, people who don't actually know this information yet, who are sufficiently unfamiliar with it, right? They're going to ask questions, and they're going to get some other steps out of you that you didn't think of. So that's a form of brilliance extraction. So I recommend that 2 things there. Record the training and also ask the trainee to write down what you teach them. And so you begin to build what I call a brilliance system. So in other words, your brilliance is beginning to get documented. And once you have the beginning of a document, now you can flesh it out further, because now that additional information has a place to go. Then third is this: replicate your brilliance. This is where really you're going to get the benefit of it. You get to scale, you get to use that fuel that's now in the can rather than just your brain, right? That brilliance fuel, you get to actually put it into action. And I encourage you to put it into action as quickly as possible, even if it's, still imperfect. first of all, perfection doesn't exist. Secondly, it's living and breathing anyway. And so that means you learn more and you're going to add more and things might change. And so you adapt to that and pivot and all these good things. So, but put it into action as quickly as possible. So last but not least, I'm going to show you a quick example. Let me see whether I can do this right here. All right, so this is an example of a company I worked with. I still work with them, called FlexTech. It's a staffing company, wonderful company. And we built this training portal. They didn't have it, right? So the owner has been in business for a long time. He's extremely smart and very experienced, and he has developed a secret sauce. So when you click here on the course catalog, let's see what is coming up. Here we go. So the first course we built was he had developed a secret sauce called the 5 Things. And he had, attempted to teach this to his people for quite a few years, actually, at least 12, he told me. And, what happened was they got it almost, but not completely. And the difference between almost and completely meant that he was still doing a lot of the heavy lifting himself. And, that meant much less work-life balance for him and much less the ability to actually tackle other things that he wanted to do. He's now working on creating more locations, and you can even think about franchising this. And so, he was also doing tech training for, beginning technicians in his business because they install low power, they do low power installations, and like hospitals and other buildings, etc. So like, what do you call it? I'm blanking on it right now. So basically low power installations for alarms and things like this is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, so he's doing training for them, and this was always live and it was never captured, but now it is captured. There's a whole course here. So if you click on this, you can see, you can see this makes it now possible for him to actually eventually ask other people, rather sooner than later, ask other people to do the training if he's away. But it also means he can say to his clients, look, this is how we teach our level 1 technicians. Wouldn't you want to have one of those? So imagine what this does to his business growth. So his business has already grown by leaps and bounds within a few months. I think we're talking about 50% or so. And as I said, this leads to the ability to now form new locations. Think about that. Without extra work. Now think about that. So that is what can happen when you free yourself from the need of micromanaging. And that, in summary, happens by making knowledge that you have in the back of your brain, this unconscious competence, accessible to other people with these 3 steps: mapping that brilliance, extracting that brilliance, and then making it teachable. Because what I didn't show you yet, but what you might have kind of seen a little bit in the thing I just showed you, is that each of these lessons is short. You don't want to give people really long lessons. You want to give them short snippets. You want to design the flow of it and make sure that it's not overwhelming, but it is. So there's an art, it's not only extracting that knowledge, but then you have to make it teachable, which means you have to understand a little bit about teaching, which is part of what we do as well. And actually, one more thing is that when I work with people, the thing that almost always needs a lot of help is the introduction, because the expert can't even think about how much introduction and contextual information a newcomer needs. Usually that gets shortcut, way too short, and that is one of the areas where help is most valuable, or at least one of the most valuable places, is to give the introduction and the context in a way that makes sense to the newcomer and not just the expert, because the expert knows it all already, and so why do I have to give all this introduction? So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to have a live Q&A very shortly. If you're interested in that, please put your information in the comments, ping me in some way here on whichever platform you are watching this on, and I will make sure you are invited. So have a great day. Ciao.